Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking a deep dive into some wildly entertaining and honestly pretty chaotic chess advice. We're going to sift through about 25 minutes of brilliant, dense material, and we're condensing the whole shebang into a highly structured journey. We'll go from that sheer panic of the opening moves all the way to absolute endgame mastery. Let's get right into it.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by mastering the opening phase, then move into middle game tactics and strategy. After that, we'll look at punishing bad pawn structures, winning the endgame, and finally, checkmates and player mindset.
All right, starting off with Section 1, mastering the opening phase, laying the groundwork.
Okay, so the absolute most crucial thing here is following these rapid-fire opening mandates. Our sources are super clear on this. Develop quickly or literally die. You've got to get your pieces off that back rank. You need to fight for and control the center of the board. Generally speaking, you want to move your knights out before your bishops, mostly because you usually know exactly where those knights need to jump to. And absolutely crucial, do not move the same piece twice in the opening. You just can't afford to waste turns unless, you happen to be Hikaru Nakamura. But for the rest of us, yeah, we need to stick to the rules.
And that brings us right to castling. Now, the source material stresses a very specific, tight timeline here. You want to aim to castle before move 10. Get it done early, whether that's kingside or queenside, just to keep your king nice and cozy and out of that dangerous center. Oh, and fun fact, if you're ever playing over the board, you actually have to do it with one hand.
But hold on, there is a massive glowing red exception to this rule. Quote, just castle early and get checkmated like Magnus. Listen, never blindly castle into a crazy strong attack on the wing. If your opponent is just shoving pawns down your throat on one side of the board, do not castle into that, or you are going to end up getting delivered home in an ambulance. Seriously, just chill, develop your other pieces, and see how the situation unfolds first.
Moving right along to Section 2, Middle Game Tactics and Strategy, Navigating the Chaos.
Okay, so now we hit this frankly brilliant concept of the desperado. What is a desperado piece? Well, it's a piece that's already doomed. It's completely trapped and it's getting captured no matter what you do. So instead of sitting there mourning it, you use it to inflict maximum damage before it gets taken off the board. If your knight is hopelessly trapped, you might as well grab a free pawn with it before it bites the dust.
The exact dramatic mindset you need to channel here is, if I'm going down, you're going down with me. It's really all about stubbornly refusing to give up your material for absolutely nothing.
And speaking of pieces, the difference between a good one and a terrible one is just staggering. A good knight chills nice and cozy on an outpost, a square where enemy pawns can't attack it, and from there, it controls huge chunks of the board. Now, contrast that with a bad bishop. A bad bishop is utterly blocked by its own pawns, basically just sniffing their butts and contributing absolutely nothing to the game. So the golden rule, never ever trade your beautiful monster knight for a crappy bishop that's just staring at a pawn wall.
Now, tactics also involve defending yourself. What do you do when your knight gets pinned to your king or queen by an enemy bishop? Well, our sources note that while your first instinct might be physical violence, there is a much more logical way out. Step 1, don't panic or cry. Step 2, just push your A-pawn. Step 3, threaten their bishop until it's finally forced to retreat. It's really that simple. Just follow these logical steps to force that bishop to run away, and boom, your knight is safe.
I absolutely love asking this next question, because it happens to every single one of us. You develop your pieces, you castle safely, everything seems totally chill, so now what? Well, the answer from our sources is delightfully aggressive. You break open the center, you start pushing your pawns forward, you force some trades, and you create absolute chaos right in the middle of the board. You can't just sit there forever.
Which perfectly tees up Section 3. Punishing bad pawn structures, exploiting weaknesses.
Have you ever suffered from what our source hilariously dubs low elo syndrome? This is the totally mistaken belief that just because an isolated pawn has a couple of defending pieces sitting behind it, that it's somehow safe. Spoiler alert, it's not. If you leave a pawn isolated behind its friends, it becomes a permanent living target. In fact, a super high-level strategy is to actively sacrifice one of your own pawns just to ruin your opponent's pawn structure and create those exact kinds of juicy weaknesses.
Let's look at the two worst offenders here. First, isolated pawns. These are a total nightmare because they require your valuable, active pieces to step back and act as babysitters. And doubled pawns? Honestly, they're even worse. That's two of your own pawns uselessly bumping into each other on the exact same vertical file. Both of these structures are fatal strategic flaws. They leave your pawns completely unable to defend each other and incredibly prone to attack.
All right, let's transition into Section 4, Winning the Endgame, the King's Awakening.
So, in the opening, the king is a total liability, right? Basically a loser that just needs to hide. But in the endgame, the king becomes an absolute god. You need to activate your main homie. Whoever brings their king out of hiding and marches it into the center of the board first during the endgame is just infinitely more likely to win. Why? Because that king can now aggressively hunt down whatever pawns are left.
And how do you safely navigate to that winning endgame? Through the simplification strategy. If you ever find yourself ahead in material, let's say you're up an extra knight or a rook, you want to simplify the board. Actively force trades with your opponent. Get all those complex pieces off the board so you don't accidentally fall victim to some tricky fork when you're low on the clock. Once the board is simplified, you can literally just coast to a mechanical victory without having to overthink it.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, Checkmates and Player Mindset, Finishing the Fight.
Okay, to finish the fight, you have to instantly recognize your kill shots. There's the killbox mate, which traps the king in a tight 3x3 box. Then there's the incredibly beautiful smothered mate, where the enemy king is literally suffocated by its own pieces. You've got the game-ending windmill, where a rook and bishop swing back and forth, capturing material on every single move. And of course, the classic back rank mate, catching a king trapped behind its very own pawns. Internalize these because they are your ultimate goals.
But how do you actually achieve these mates? Well, sometimes you have to make some incredibly daring trades. Wakanda forever. That is the hilarious battle cry our source suggests you channel when you're trading off your crappy, inactive piece for your opponent's strongest, most active piece. Don't be intimidated by their good pieces. Challenge them, trade them off, and clear the runway for your own massive attack.
A huge part of that attacking mindset is pure discipline. When you see a good move, you have to stop. Look for a better one. The progression of a chess mind here is just fascinating. A rookie sees an obvious piece and just impulsively takes it. A grandmaster like Hikaru pauses and finds the immediate knockout blow. But a world champion like Magnus Carlsen, he looks at the entire board, spots some obscure en passant, and just completely dismantles the opponent. So, elevate your mindset. Always look deeper.
But above all else, attacking chess requires absolute ice in your veins. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is seeing multiple of your own pieces disappear from the board in a massive sacrifice and still chilling. Attacking chess is definitely not for the faint of heart. You have to keep your cool, trust your deep calculation, and just execute the plan.
Which leads us perfectly to our final, highly provocative question drawn directly from our sources today. Armed with this newly organized knowledge, from fundamental opening principles all the way to endgame king activation, what kind of player are you going to be? Are you going to take risks, sacrifice pieces, and fight through the absolute chaos for the win? Or will you, as the source bluntly puts it, live a beta male life and just resign when things get a little tough? The choice is entirely yours once you sit at that board. Embrace the chaos and never, ever back down. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.